Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and Tebow.
Alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Welcome back to the Redbird Report as the Cardinals have won 5 games in a row. It's the first time that has happened in just about a calendar year, T-Bone. They did it one time, the entirety of the 2024 season. They had one other 5-game winning streak back in 2023. That actually was extended to 6 games. So if you're feeling like you're a little more optimistic today about the Cardinals than you have been in quite some time, that's because they're playing better baseball than they have in quite some time. And a big part of that is, man, they're pitching really well right now. Sonny Gray was excellent. We were recording this on Wednesday afternoon. He pitched 7 scoreless against Pittsburgh today. Matthew Liberatore was fantastic yesterday as well. And so now it's got me thinking, Tebow. When you look back toward the beginning of the season, you look at some of their early road trips. They go a combined 0-7 against the Red Sox in Boston and the Mets in New York. They had a negative 27 run differential in those 7 games against those two teams. Beyond those two series, the Cardinals are 19-12 on the season, and they have a plus 35 run differential. So my question that I'd like to open the show with for today: are the Cardinals more of what they were against the Mets and the Red Sox, or are they more of what they have been in every other game so far this season, where they are a well above 500 team that's playing some pretty high-level baseball? How do you feel about the Cardinals today when you take into account those series took place quite a while ago now?
I think they are the team when you take away those road games. I think those road games are now looking like an anomaly on the season. And the reason I say that is when you think back to those road games, what happened? The bullpen happened, right? The Ryan Fernandez had blow up. John King had a couple of blow ups. You have the one weird outing from Miles Michaelis, who outside that Boston start's been fantastic. And then the bullpen didn't do a good enough job of salvaging things along the way in that one. But when I bring all of that up, it feels like they've started to do that churn through the bullpen, as we've talked about. Gordon Graceffo is now in the bullpen for them. Steven Matz is now going to be in the bullpen for them. I like what we're seeing from JoJo recently. And then everything else that I haven't really talked about, the rotation has been really good every turn through since that Boston series. They've been fantastic. On the season, the numbers won't blow you away. A 4.11 ERA is 18th best in baseball. You would sign up for that from this group, I would say. And then you look at their offense, and their offense has slowed down a little bit. But for the most part, everybody's kind of taken a little bit of an extra step throughout this. You've seen Brendan Donovan continue to be the guy that he was in the first month of the season. Lars Nootbaar continues to be good at the top of the order. Mason Wynn has slid into that 2 spot very well. Wilson Contreras is starting to hit. They have the 5th best strikeout rate in all of baseball from their offense. They do not strike out. They're putting the ball in play, putting pressure on. That's what makes me think that those 2 series that you made reference to were the anomalies. It was just the bullpen wasn't fixed yet. Now that they've started to get a little bit better answers on their bullpen, they've got the 2nd best bullpen ERA in baseball at home this season. It makes me think that those 2 road series were just the one-offs from this ball club.
So you look back at what went wrong. You're right. It was the bullpen, right? You just want to do the umbrella. That's what it was. You look more specifically in those 2 series, Boston, New York, your bullpen threw a combined 24 innings. They allowed 38 hits and 22 earned runs. Ooh. 22 earned runs in 24 innings. That's hard to accomplish. They somehow found a way to do so. That's an 8.2 ERA for those keeping track at home. The guys that blew up for the most part in those games, Ryan Fernandez is a part of 3 of the blow-ups. Gordon Graceffo was his first real opportunity up here. He came in, immediately gave up a home run against Boston, and then was okay the next couple of innings, and then just imploded down the stretch. He's not anymore being utilized as the long man. He is now a guy that's coming into short spurts. Ryan Helsley has had a bad day, and then Kyle Lee, he had like one relatively bad inning, all things considered. It's mostly, hey, Ryan Fernandez was really bad for a couple of weeks, and Gordon Graceffo had a bad inning. That is what explains the bullpen implosion there. Well, Fernandez is now gone. Graceffo has seemingly found himself, and he's not being asked to go like 3+ innings the way that he was in that game against Boston. So since then, the bullpen's been great. On the season, if you remove those two series, New York and Boston, the Cardinals bullpen has a 3.4 ERA. And you look at what they've had pitching-wise since that Boston series, starting pitching-wise, T-Bone, they're at a 3.3 ERA, which is top 7 in Major League Baseball. You're getting great pitching right now. And you mentioned the offense. It has taken a bit of a step back. It's slightly below league average since that Boston series. A lot of that, and we'll get to this, is related to Ivan Herrera, who was a huge piece of the success that the offense had early on in the season. This, to me, looks like last year's Brewers. They are number 1 in Major League Baseball in outs above average. They have been an excellent defensive team so far this year. A lot of that, Mason Wynn has been great at shortstop for you, and Victor Scott II has been unbelievable defensively in center field. You really don't have a weak spot on the diamond right now defensively, so you're picking it well. You're solid offensively, and you're coming through in a lot of these clutch situations. And then your pitching, since that Boston series, has been dynamite. That's not a super sexy team. It's not one that people nationally are going to be talking about as like, oh my God, watch out for the Cardinals, World Series or bust. No, that's not in the realm of the possible for them. But they're starting to play like the team that we hoped they would be, and they're starting to get some more positive answers on the young guys. So I do think the Boston and New York series, we're going to look back at them and say those were the outliers. That doesn't mean that this is suddenly a World Series or bust team. It just means that they're probably more in line of 80 to 86 wins this year. That's probably the true talent of this team. And we had said it at the time, and it's why the bullpen stuff was so frustrating, because they didn't have to stick with guys as long as they did. I'm not sure Graceffo would have been the guy that I thought was going to be the answer to these problems. But I thought Riley O'Brien maybe could. Maybe it was Matt Swanson. Maybe it was send Chris Roycroft down a little bit earlier and get answers quicker on him, get him fixed quicker, and then he can come back up and be a part of the solution again. They waited a little longer than I would have liked. The Steven Matz thing where he's a part of your 6-man rotation, that put more stress on the lefties early on as well. But regardless, they seem to have fixed the bullpen problems, and with that, you feel better when you go into these late game situations beyond just the big three that's been there all season.
Yeah, now that they have kind of churned through the bullpen, and to their credit, they tried O'Brien, which I think I was advocating for 2 weeks ago on this podcast. You know, they've tried Swanson to an extent. They tried Munoz. Like, at least they tried those guys and tried to see if they would be guys that could give them answers. But now that they have kind of settled in on Graceffo, and if you want to have your critiques on if they got to him a little bit later than they should have, I think it's somewhat fair, because I think they've always known this was going to be his role, and they were more cautious than anything else by having him be an 8th starter in the organization, because it was going to be Matt McGreevy than him, but whatever. The bullpen, now that it feels fixed, and look, this thing could change. We could be talking in a week. They go on the road. This team is an enigma for us when they go on the road because they don't play well on the road. It's possible that this all changes, but now that it feels like they've got multiple options down there, to where, like, you look at the game, we're recording on Wednesday, you look at the game Tuesday night, they go to Mads, they go to Graceffo, those guys close out that game because your best arms are down for that day. That makes me feel confident that this team is going to have a fighting chance to be above 500 this month. In a month, by the way, where it's, I think 15 of their 21 games are against teams above 500. They've only got 2 series against teams. They're both on the road against teams below 500. That is the Washington Nationals coming up this weekend, and then Baltimore at the end of the month. With a bullpen like this, it's got a little bit of swing and miss now that Graceffo's brought into it. Matz has been brought into it. Maton and Helsley have got pretty good swing and miss stuff. Leahy, too. This is a bullpen that you can kind of turn to, and if a starter has a bad day, won't let the game get away from you. And that's been their biggest problem when they've been looking at this bullpen early on.
I have not viewed this season about, like, Cardinals are struggling against the good teams and they're just beating up on bad teams, right? Like, you mentioned the schedule that's coming up. That's why I bring this up. This has always been about them. Like, they're just not taking care of their own business. It's about, why is the bullpen imploding as often as it is? Or there have been a couple of games where the offense just doesn't ever get anything going, and you get too late in the game. You're already down 5-0. There's too much to overcome by the time you get to the 7th, 8th inning. There are times in those situations where they've found a way to claw back into the game, but they just can't overcome that kind of a deficit. Those are just games that you know going into the season. Every team's going to lose 60 games somehow. that's sometimes the way that it goes. But the Cardinals play fine against quality opponents. It's just been a couple of those games. And listen, like Boston's solid, New York is solid. Don't get me wrong. Part of this was especially the Mets series. They just had great pitching in that series.
Yeah, and real quick, like as you say that, I'm looking through these series. Like let's just run through the series they've lost. And I'm even going to throw in the ones that are against the non-quality team. Sorry, Angels. But when you lost 2 or 3 to the Angels, what happened in that series? You lost in extras, but you got to extras and you lost in extras. Why? Your bullpen.
Yep.
You take a look at that Boston series. You just didn't pitch like that one. We as much as we can blame the bullpen, and Helsley had the one bad, we can blame the pitching as a whole on that one. And then that Pittsburgh series, that one, what happened? Their bullpen really let that first game slip away. They were in that game, and then it slips away. They lose 8-4. Then that second loss in that series was the offense. You then take a look at the Mets series. The bullpen. You were in that game. That series was tight the whole way. Your bullpen was just that slight margin that led to you getting swept. What happened in Atlanta? What led you to get lost 2 or 3? Your bullpen. And then that's basically where we are at now to this point, because I don't think they have not lost a series since then. They split with Cincinnati,
but that was just a well-played series by both teams.
Yeah, and that's to your point. Like we're not looking at those series. In the Mets one, I think you can argue hey, the Mets were just a better team.
Yeah, definitely.
Outside of that series, any series that we just said that they lost, we can point to a fault of the St. Louis Cardinals that led them to really letting that series slip from them.
It's just not like sometimes you watch bad baseball teams, and I know for many people that are listening right now, they may be saying, or watching on YouTube as well, they may be saying to themselves, like, the Cardinals are a bad baseball team. Why are you guys trying to convince yourself otherwise? When you watch bad baseball teams, it looks like the White Sox where they're throwing the ball all over the place. They're making these stupid mistakes. And it's base running, it's defense, it's not just the bullpen, but even the starting pitchers are like, they are maximizing the problem within the bullpen where they're not getting deep into games. Like, these are not the problems that the Cardinals are facing this season. The Cardinals sometimes don't find ways to score enough runs. Like, that's going to happen to any team that has this kind of youth in the lineup where you go through slumps and you hope that you shorten the slump as much as possible, but you're just going to have guys that go through extended slumps sometimes. It is what it is. And the Cardinals this year have had a bullpen that is really leaky at times, where they have to go to Maton and Leahy and Helsley every time they have a lead, because if you don't, your sphincter tightens because you know they're going to find a way to give up 7 runs that day, right? So when you only have 3 guys that you trust, it puts so much stress on the lineup to produce so that way you don't have to go to those guys every night. It puts stress on the manager to consistently throw those guys out there because if you don't, we're going to lose another one here. And it puts stress on the defense because if there is any mistake or the base running, it gets, again, maximized. It goes under the microscope. So the Cardinals are just like, they're one of those teams this year that has one clear and obvious problem. And I agree with you that they're fixing it. I think they have found some stuff that is working right now with Graceffo and with Steven Matz now being added to the bullpen seemingly full time. They're not going back to that 6-man rotation, at least not in the immediate future with all of these Thursday off days coming up. I really want to see what this looks like in the road trip because so far it's been Cardinals are one team at home and another team on the road this season. Really good at home, horrible on the road. We just went through why. It's the bullpen. Well, now you have finally found answers. Are those answers going to plug those holes? Or is this just like a lot of the time the Cardinals have these weird anomalies? Like I remember I think it was 2015. They had like 7 guys start games for them that season, which was just crazy. No, it's a total outlier season. Or there was a couple of years where they had like these crazy runners with runners in scoring position numbers, right? There's always something weird about the Cardinals. Maybe this year that weird thing is they just can't win on the road, right? That's possible, I suppose. But my belief is, now that they have the bullpen fixed, we're going to start to see them take care of some of these games that they were otherwise blowing while they were on the road.
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, I mean, you mentioned the Brewers. I think that's a pretty good comp. Their bullpen reminds me of the 21 Cardinals bullpen, where there were 3 guys. And you mentioned how Ollie was getting kind of put in a spot where he had to just go with those 3 arms. That's what Schilt had at that time. At that time, it was Alex Reyes, Giovanni Gallegos, and I think it was Genesis Cabrera was the third one, if I remember correctly. That was it. That was that whole bullpen. Now, they had the problem where their starters weren't getting deep, and it really they looked like the bad baseball team you were describing, and they needed a 17-game winning streak to get it figured out.
I think it was either June or July. They were on national TV. It was an ESPN game. I'll never forget it. And Tim Kirkjian said on the game, who is like never critical. Tim Kirkjian, one of the nicest guys you'll ever see. And on the games, it's mostly like storytelling, that kind of stuff, right? Tim Kirkjian said on the game, Cardinals fans are smart. They know when they're watching bad baseball, and this is bad baseball. Yeah. And I'll never forget it. It was one of those moments where you're like, okay, thank you for verifying what we have been saying locally, because it has been some really bad baseball. Was that the summer where they lost like 17 of 20 or something in June? That was that June, right?
That was when they had Ponce de Leon, John Gant were like two of your starters. Carlos Martinez at that point had lost all of his stuff. Like, they were just flailing in the wind. And I think at that point, Jack got hurt.
John Lester deadline where they just had to stabilize things.
And the most important part, too, that they did is because they could make those bullpen or those starter moves. They did what we were talking about with the bullpen, right? The thing we got frustrated about. And this is why I kept saying I don't understand this holding the line on Ryan Fernandez. And look, I hope we see Ryan Fernandez. This team will be better if Ryan Fernandez gets back to this spot. Imagine the five guys that we were just talking about, and then I add a sixth, and that's Ryan Fernandez from last year. That's a loaded bullpen. But the reason I kept saying, like, hey, bullpens are so fickle, these things have to be turned over throughout a season. And at some point, you hope you find answers. Well, what did that team do? They found TJ McFarland, and they found Luis Garcia, who was unbelievable for them and some of the best arms they had. And that's why, to your point, I do believe that we're going to see them go on this road trip and have success. Now, I don't know if they're winning all three of these series. At Washington, you should be able to beat the Nationals. You are ahead of them, in my opinion, where they're at in their life cycle. But then the Philadelphia Phillies are not an easy task. Kansas City Royals are not an easy task. But you should be able, with this bullpen, to where when we leave these series, not have to say, oh, there's that bullpen again. Guess what? The underbelly of the pen doesn't do its job. Lets a game get away, or they lose in extras. It should be, hey, you know what? Either our offense just got shut down because we saw Zach Wheeler maybe in this series, or some of the best pitchers in baseball, or you look at it and you say, you know what? Tip of the cap, that team was just better than us today.
All right, T-Bone. You mentioned one of the best pitchers in baseball in Zach Wheeler. I don't think the Cardinals have any of those guys, but they might be developing a legitimate middle-of-the-rotation arm right now. We're going to do something that doesn't happen very often in St. Louis. We're going to give some credit to the pitching coach. We'll do that next here on the Redbird Report. So the Cardinals have had a problem in recent seasons, T-Bone. They don't know how to develop young starting pitchers. It has been something that has plagued them really for the past 5 or 6 years, and I would say it's the number one reason why they are going with Chaim Bloom as their next president of baseball operations. And they might be finding an answer to that. Last year, they seemingly developed Andre Pallante on the fly. He was a bullpen arm. He wanted to go down to the minor leagues because he had to fix his problems against right-handed hitters, right? He was effectively serving, despite throwing with his right hand, as a lefty because of his issues that he had with right-handed hitters. So they developed a plan. And this is something that the Cardinals pointed to during the offseason and said, what we did with Pallante, we hope can be something that we can point back to and say, that was proof of concept. That was a reminder of what we're capable of when the entire organization goes all in on somebody's development. So that was the pitching coach at the major league level working in tandem with the minor league pitching coaches, and they figured out a way to make Andre Pallante into basically a middle to back end of the rotation starter. Might not sound like a huge deal. That is basically saving your organization $10 to $15 million a year, is what you do when you develop that guy from within. So this season, we're seeing something similar. They tried this experiment with Matthew Liberatore. It was not a popular one. I would say 95% of Cardinals fans wanted to see Michael McGreevy in the rotation over Matthew Liberatore. And despite that, it has been a smashing success. They could not have asked for anything more. He has started 7 games, and in 6 of them, he has basically had the opportunity to go at least 6 innings. One of them was the rain delay, and so he ends up being taken out of the game despite trying to go back in. He went out to the bullpen to try to throw a simulated inning during that rain delay to convince the manager to put him back out there. He said, no, we're not doing that. We're not risking this with you health-wise. So other than that, he's gone at least 6 innings in every single one of his starts. He has a 3.1 ERA so far this season. There were like 15 starters in Major League Baseball that were qualified that had a 3.1 ERA last year. He's been awesome. And T-Bone, I have to give a lot of credit to the person that nobody gives credit to. I got to give credit to Dusty Blake, because we have now seen him do this with Matthew Liberatore this year, Andre Palante, I'm at least going to give him partial credit for last year. We saw him do it with Jordan Hicks as well when everybody wanted, including myself, for Jordan Hicks to be sent away. Well, Dusty Blake found a way to get the most out of those guys. He's doing it right now as well with Miles Mikolas. Nobody wants to talk about it, but Mikolas has been really good since that big blow-up that he had. His last 5 starts, like a 2.5 ERA. Sign up for that every day of the week. I don't know what the future holds for Matthew Liberatore. I don't know if this is going to be sustainable and he's going to be a mid-rotation starter or if he eventually goes back to the bullpen. I don't know. But it has clearly been worth their time, and the Cardinals deserve a lot of credit, and Dusty Blake deserves a lot of credit for getting this guy on track at the age of 25, when I would say most fans gave up on this idea of Matthew Liberatore ever being a consistent starter for the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Dusty Blake deserves a ton of credit, and I was one of those people that was saying, I can't even believe you're trying this, right? I thought for sure you look at him and you go, boy, we need a left-handed arm, because I didn't really trust JoJo or John King coming into the season. And I thought, okay, well, Matthew Liberatore was your best high-leverage arm. Why are you plucking away from that to make the bullpen worse, to move him into the rotation where he couldn't get right-handed batters out? So I was against this move. But credit to Dusty Blake, Ollie Marmol, the entire coaching staff that's been able to work with him to fine-tune this. And to your point, it's not like this has been a one-off for Dusty Blake. He seems to be able to do this with a lot of guys throughout his time here in St. Louis. You mentioned Jordan Hicks, from a guy that we were clamoring they should DFA to they're able to fix him and trade him to Toronto, I think it was, if I remember correctly, and got some decent prospects back in return in that deal. Think about when they acquired Jordan Montgomery, Jose Quintana. He was able to work with those guys and really maximize their stuff. Miles Mikolas, who you mentioned, has been very good for the Cardinals. Andre Palante, like the list goes on. And he was able to, it wasn't the same level that we saw from JoJo early on in the season. But remember, JoJo, there was that weird stretch last year, I think it was in June or July, where like he disappeared. You like totally forgot he was on the roster, and he only would come in low leverage situations. Why? Because they were working on, I believe it was his changeup last year was the pitch that they were trying to get back the shape of it with. And what happens is they work on it, and then about a month later, boom, he's back into the same spot he was in at the beginning of the season. Maybe a little less swing and miss, but the changeup had gotten back to where it was. Dusty Blake deserves a ton of credit for what he's done with Matthew Liberatore and these young pitchers. And to your point on that cost control, instead of having to go to the market and find those guys, we would agree, Yusei Kikuchi of the LA Angels is like a number 3 starter, right?
Sure.
I think that's what Matthew Liberatore is going to ultimately be, as a number 3 starter. And maybe I'm wrong there too, but Yusei Kikuchi just got a 3-year, $63 million deal from the LA Angels on the market at $21 million, just a little over $21 million as an AAV on that contract. That right there is why we're talking about how important it is to develop these cost control arms in both Andre Palante and in Matthew Liberatore, because that's now kind of the market for the number 3 starter. Is about 20 mil. Matt's previously was around that $15-16 million. It's only gone up higher as the inflation's gone up now.
It's interesting too, because like you look at the way that he's going about it, almost nothing about his arsenal has changed this year. You look at some of the spin rate stuff, you look at the velocity, you look at the actual usage of his pitch mix. It's all almost exactly in line with where it's been in the past whenever he's been a starter, especially last season, and even when he was a reliever. What's changed is the effectiveness of these pitches. And some of that could be sequencing. Some of that could be confidence in where you're throwing it inside of the zone, right? Like a 4-seamer where you're nibbling and it's always consistently the pitch, the hitters know it's going to be on the outside. You don't have to worry about it. It's going to be up. It's going to be out of the zone. That is not nearly as imposing as a guy that knows exactly where he's pinpointing his stuff. And this year is one of the lowest walk rates in Major League Baseball. So he's consistently in the zone. And when he's in there, he's missing bats. And even when guys do make contact, they're not hitting for any power. Now, knock on wood, this could change, but that's probably the biggest change for him. Like you look, for example, at his 4-seam fastball, which is one of the most important pitches for any starter, but certainly for Matthew Liberatore, because there have been times in the past, especially when he was a starter for the Cardinals, where that was a disaster, especially going in on right-handed hitters. His 4-seam just did not play for him. Last year, even when he was having some success, right, .630 slugging percentage against his 4-seam fastball. This year, and this is not like the underlying numbers suggest this is real, .330 slugging percentage against his four-seam fastball. And then the cutter has been a huge pitch for him because he had issues in the past against right-handed hitters. That was the big thing for him. Don't put him out there in a right-handed lane. Put him out there specifically for lefties. Last year, 600 slugging percentage against his cutter. This year, 350. So when people are getting him, it's just for average. It's not for power. That's the single biggest change for him. I would be fascinated. Next time I go out to the ballpark, I'll be sure to ask about this to hear what they think has really changed, why they've become so much more effective. Because the usage is the same, but the effectiveness has changed exponentially.
So can I give you my guess on the at least the fastball one? This would be my guess, and it'd be interesting to hear what Ollie and Dusty would have to say when we're out at the ballpark. I think it's the changeup now. When you look at what he can use, because when you talk about that cutter, kind of the slider, and when you're thinking about pitch kind of profile, why does Sonny Gray throw a cutter, a sweeper, and a slider? It's because he wants kind of all three variations because they're kind of the same pitch. They've got at least kind of the same movement. Well, when you think about the four-seam fastball, you look at his changeup usage, 4.6% last year, up to 12% this year. It's his best pitch, 118 batting average against and a 118 slugging percentage against his changeup. My guess is it's the changeup is coming out of potentially the same slot as a fastball, but now that you have to worry about the changeup, it is adding to less reaction on the fastball, would be my guess. That is the only thing that I can look at, because that to me is the only thing that looks different about his profile, is the changeup is now more of a pitch that he is using. Because you're right, everything with like the sinker, the cutter, the four-seamer, the slider, everything looks about the same. The spin, the usage on it for an extent. The changeup's the pitch that he's really starting to throw now in his outings.
Yeah, and they're all like, even location-wise, it's mostly pretty much the same as what it's been in the past. The thing that I find most interesting about Matthew Liberatore, do you remember when the Cardinals traded for him and the pitch that everybody talked about?
The curveball.
And now it's like a nothing burger for him.
Yeah.
It's his least utilized pitch. It is the one that tends to get hit the hardest. Like, it is so interesting to me that this curveball that was so important, it was like the identity of Matthew Liberatore. It was like, hey, this is going to be the pitch. You don't have to worry about it. No doubt about it. He's going to be a mid-rotation starter. Easily projectable. He has great command, has a clear plus pitch. Like, this is the thing. And then I remember the first time that we saw Matthew Liberatore, we saw him, and then we saw Zach Thompson. I was like, Zach Thompson's curveball's better than Matthew Liberatore's, though. I don't understand why Libby is the one that we're talking about so much with the curveball. Now you fast forward 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and the curveball is not only his worst pitch, it's the one that he utilizes the least often. So it's been quite the process to get to where we are, but where we are is the Cardinals have seemingly developed a legitimate middle-of-the-rotation arm. So you have him pairing with Andre Palante at the back end of your rotation now. You feel really good about that. You've got Graceffo, who they might have developed into, at a minimum, a really solid bullpen arm for them right now. Got a few other guys that are making their way through the minor leagues that you hope will eventually become upper to middle of the rotation arms as well. For the first time in a while, you feel like you have almost a wave of young arms coming through the system, and that hasn't really happened since like Jack Flaherty, Luke Weaver, Alex Reyes, that group that came up in probably 2017-ish, 2016-ish, that kind of time frame for the Cardinals. They've been severely lacking these kinds of internal options that have came through their system. So credit to them, credit to Dusty Blake for making the necessary changes. This was the number one goal for 2025.
And it comes at a really good time for them because of the young pieces they've got in the lineup too, right? Most of their lineup is not veterans. Like, I'm looking at that 2017 Cardinals team. Looks like Waka, that was here. You have Waka that's up there at the age of 25. You've got Martinez, who's 25, pitching well at that time. Yeah. So it's a little bit before the Flaherty comes onto the system. But this is the age of your position players. 34-year-old Yadier Molina, 31-year-old Matt Carpenter. You've got 29-year-old Tommy Pham, 31-year-old Dexter Fowler. You got a 28-year-old like Jed Jerko, who was more of a fill-in piece at that time. Like, the young core offensively wasn't there yet. They were just starting to sprinkle in Paul DeYoung. Colton Wong were starting to really find a name.
Grichuk, I think, was right around that time.
Grichuk was on the bench for him. He got 122 games, so I think the next year's when he takes that step. Piscotty was still young at that point, too. Like, there's a little bit more of a younger balance on this year's Cardinals team than there was on those teams, but it's just a matter of, do you have those reinforcements coming with the arms? Because where they are lacking, and this will be something that you hope we've talked about, that pendulum that swings a lot, they've kind of dried out the offensive position player side of things, because the best prospects they probably have coming from that side are Sajasi, who looked very good when he was up here, J.J. Weatherholt, and then maybe Jimmy
17
Crooks.
different catching prospects.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't have a lot coming on the offensive side. It's why they really need to hit on some of this young pitching, and then maybe reinforce the development system through a couple of drafts with offensive players, even add more arms to that mix. They feel like they're in a pretty good spot as long as they avoid that huge pendulum swing.
You mentioned reinforcements. On the pitching side of things, you have things coming through, have a bunch of arms coming through the system. On the hitting side of things, you have a guy who's coming back from the injured list. Ivan Herrera is close to his return. Even by the time you listen to this, he may have already been activated from the injured list. We're going to discuss his impact on the roster, some of the lineup decisions that could lead to who they send down for Ivan Herrera. We'll discuss all of that next on the Redbird Report. Cardinals have another big decision to make very soon. Ivan Herrera is on his way back to the big leagues. He's been doing pretty well so far down in the minors while he's been going through his rehab assignment down there. And T-Bone, they have a few different options. Ivan Herrera, when he returns, Ollie Marmol said earlier this week, he is likely going to get more designated hitter opportunities than he will whenever he's fully healthy, because they just want to make sure that knee is 100% before they put him full-time back behind the plate. Makes all the sense in the world. Don't have any issues with that whatsoever. The bat is the most important thing. You've got to get that back into your lineup. So that means they've got a big decision. Do you go with 3 catchers and keep Pozo up here? Or do you send Pozo down? It's just a 1-for-1 swap with Ivan Herrera. If you decide to keep Pozo up, you could send down Luken Baker. That is one option. They have not been utilizing pinch hitters very often lately. We'll get into that here in just a moment. Jose Barrero is another option, technically speaking, that you could send back down as well, but Barrero has been serving as both the backup shortstop and the backup center fielder lately, so I don't know how likely that is. I think this is going to come down to a decision between, do we want to have that third catcher or not? And if they do want to keep the third catcher, it's probably Luken Baker that gets sent down. If they don't mind just going with Ivan Herrera as the backup, and then Pedro Baez as the guy that gets the majority of those opportunities to start things out, then Pozo probably goes down and Luken Baker sticks around for a little while. How do you view this, and what do you think should be going into their decision in that regard?
So I agree it's going to come down to those options that you were talking about. I think the way that they will do it is probably the same way that I would do it as well, which is I think you just send down Pozo and you activate Ivan Herrera. I think you keep Herrera because it's clear they view him now, and I think he's only done it once, but they clearly view him as the backup center fielder. So when you do need to give Victor Scott a day off, they put him out in center field, and he serves as the backup at shortstop as well in case there is issues with Mason Wynn. And as we've seen, he's dealt with some back stuff this year. He had a freak ankle injury. Stuff like that can happen. And I think they have kind of wanted to say, oh, let's not get in that spot where we are forced to call up Sajasi or move Donovan over to shortstop. Let's just keep Herrera here. He's athletic as hell. He's an incredible athlete. I think they will stick with him. I think they will still stick with Luken Baker and try and get him starts against left-handed pitching if they can, if Herrera's not the DH in that day. And I wonder if they're pivoting back towards giving him more pinch hit opportunities. We can talk about that here in a second. So I think you send down Pozo, and I think you just carry Herrera. And if you are going to start him at DH and you do have Paz as the catcher, I think you have to just be willing to say, hey, one of two things. One, we're not going to pinch hit for Paz, which they haven't done for a while now. Or two, if we do get to a spot where it is, hey, yeah, let's decide to pinch hit for him, you're willing to lose the DH late in the ballgame, and then you slide Herrera back behind the plate.
Man, I just don't know where those opportunities are coming for Luken Baker. Like, if you're going to keep him up, and this changed a little bit today with the decision that Ollie Marmol made against the Pittsburgh Pirates, but his spot has really been, hey, you're the DH against left-handed pitchers. That's the only opportunity that he's had to start for the Cardinals, dating back to, those are the only starts he's made this year. He's only made starts as a designated hitter against left-handed starters. And then if you look at, okay, well, what about the other days, BK? Is he getting opportunities coming off of the bench? Well, early on the season, yeah, he was. He was getting a lot of them.
And he's
and
pretty
then
good at them, by the way.
Something changed. And we talked about this, I think, on the last episode, T-Bone, but the Cardinals just stopped pinch hitting. Like, just completely stopped pinch hitting. Here were the 3 games in which they had an opportunity to pinch hit since the Mets series, which was 15 games ago, otherwise known as 3 weeks ago now. April 27th against Milwaukee, bottom of the 8th inning, Burleson hit for Baker while they were down 7-1 to lead off the inning. In other words, a non-leverage situation. April 30th, top of the 9th inning, second game of the doubleheader. The Cardinals are up 9-1, and Pozo comes in for Nootbaar just to get Nootbaar out of the game. No reason for him to take that at bat there. And then the next day, again against Cincinnati, top of the 9th inning, down 9-1. Burleson hits for Contreras, Gorman hits for Arenado. In other words, getting your veterans out there for some of the younger guys, getting them off their feet for the rest of that game. There was no reason to do so. Game was over in the 9th inning. You were down 9-1 in that spot. So 0 leverage spots between the New York Mets series, which was 3 weeks ago, and today, when suddenly the Cardinals did it again. The Cardinals against the Pirates were up 3-0. It was the bottom of the 8th inning, and Luken Baker came in to hit for Alec Burleson against a left-handed pitcher. He doubled down the line. Walker singled in 2 runs a couple of batters later. They go up 5-0. You get out of the save situation. You can save Ryan Helsley for another couple of days, and then he's ready to go for you, fully rested going into this weekend. I say all of that to say this. If the plan is to once again utilize Luken Baker because you're now back to 500 and okay, now the wins start to matter again, then cool, keep him around. But if you're not going to utilize him as a pinch hitter, and his spot as a designated hitter against lefties is now going to be taken by Ivan Herrera, he serves no value on the roster. So in that case, to me, you actually have more value with Pozo being around than you would with Luken Baker, because at least Pozo can potentially give you some opportunities as a catcher. And I mean, worst case scenario, if you do, for whatever reason, decide to suddenly start pinch hitting again, one of those spots might be for either Pozo or Pages, and then you can go ahead and replace that guy with the other catcher that's still on your roster. So it all depends to me on what their outlook is now for pinch hitting. I don't know. I have a hard time reading this because it's been multiple different things depending on which week we talk about it.
Yeah, so if you don't use Baker, I do agree it probably is better to send him down because there is more value on that spot in the roster for a backup catcher in that sense. And even then, that just provides the sense of, because even if you don't pinch hit still in that scenario where you're saying, well, we just need the third catcher, well, that is the break glass in case of emergency. Well, if Pages gets hurt, now we don't have to worry about potentially losing the DH in the 3rd inning, for example, because Herrera's the DH and now we can put Pozo behind the plate. So that makes sense. I just think that it still makes sense for them, and I don't know where you are on this. They said in the offseason, hey, we kind of want to develop a bat off the bench of Luken Baker type, right? A guy that's a bench bat, that's his role. We agree if Luken Baker's going to be a big leaguer, it's probably going to be in the role that he was destined to serve this season, which was, hey, off the bench, you're going to be potentially a starter against left-handed specialists, but if anything else, you're going to come in high leverage spot against a left-handed reliever. I wonder if they are still sticking with that. It is weird that they abandoned it. I wonder if they were working on something with Luken Baker, because I just looked. In that Mets series, did not record a hit. Today, on May 7th, was his first hit since April 15th. So it had almost been a month since he had recorded a hit. But again, that was only 6 games.
I was about to say, how many opportunities did he have, though, in that
10.
In that stretch? Yeah.
or 11, I guess, not counting the hit in the Houston
And I think he had a few walks in there. So it wasn't like he was just a complete non-factor.
He had 357 on base.
Yeah, so he was good. He just wasn't recording hits. And when, the reason why I bring this up, T-Bone, like, I'm with you. If you want to develop a bench bat, I'm totally cool with that. He has to get more than 10 opportunities over the course of a month to become that bench bat. And if you just allow him to sit on the bench every single day, I do think it eventually can like mess with your timing and like you aren't in game situations. So there does come a certain point in time. I think they overdo this sometimes, but right now, given where they're at, there does come a point in time where you send Luken Baker down actually literally for his own benefit so he can get his timing back. And then when he returns a couple of weeks later, most likely, you can then start utilizing him, hopefully, in late game situations again.
Well, and what I don't fully understand about like what happened today, and like I wouldn't have cared either way if they decided, because it was, I think, runner at first, they're up 3-0, bottom of the 8th inning when the Cardinals decide to pinch it, Alec Burleson for Luken Baker, and then Baker doubles. They've
switched that around. They switched Luken Baker for Alec Burleson.
Or sorry, yes. But the reason I bring it up is what I find interesting about it is between your two left-handed bats that were in the lineup today, Burleson and Gorman. And Gorman came in because Arenado was scratched. But of the two left-handed bats today that were in that lineup, if I told you right now, lefty's coming in, who are you pinch hitting for? And those two are back-to-back with our right-handed bat and Luke and Baker. I would think that answer was going to be Nolan Gorman.
Burleson's been worse against lefties in their careers.
I get it, but if you're still going with this idea of, well, we're also going to try and give guys opportunities, I would think right now you would stick with the hotter bat in Alec Burleson to say, okay, let's see what he looks like against a lefty. And then when we get to the Gorman spot, we pinch it for Baker, and then we turn to Barrero as a defensive replacement. It's just weird how all of this has decided to play itself out, because for Luke and Baker, you're right, he needs more than just 10 at-bats to try and develop as a bench bat for this team. And if you don't even feel that is valuable for this season, and it is better to get him playing time down in the minor leagues, then what is Luke and Baker's value to the organization? Because we're getting to the point where it is no longer time to say, well, we'll figure out Luke and Baker next year. No, you're kind of running out of time on Luke and Baker. Not because he's in the arbitration system, but he's just getting older, and his value is going down as a prospect throughout baseball.
I don't think he's a prospect, though. Like, Luke and Baker is just not a guy that you're losing value on. This is probably what he's going to be. So I don't think there are teams out there like champing at the bit trying to trade for Luke and Baker, and that is no disrespect to him. I don't mean for it to come off that way. I think this is what Luke and Baker's going to be in his career. There's a real role for him on a Major League Baseball team. I don't think you're like losing out on extracting value from him, though, necessarily.
I think he's like Juan Yepez is what he is. And what I mean by that is a guy that's bat first, never probably going to find a real position for him. And the Cardinals lost Yepez by DFAing him. Like, I think you could have gotten, even if it's just a shot in the dark bullpen arm, right? Like, that's what I'm saying. I agree. He's not a, Nolan Gorman, to where if he flames out, you make the O'Neill trade and those two guys are DFA'd and off your roster by July of the year that you made that deal. But he is the one that, you're right, is the pivot point for what you decide to do when Ivan Herrera comes back.
So when Ivan Herrera returns, and that is expected to be at some point this weekend, the Cardinals will have basically their full lineup available to him. Now, it is worth noting Nolan Arenado was scratched from the game today due to back tightness. They said it was back spasm. So maybe that is the move, right? I suppose it's possible that Arenado could go on the injured list. They want that thing to heal up, and then Ivan Herrera comes up. Boom, there's what the roster looks like. It's possible. I hope that's not the case. It sounds like this was mostly precautionary, but we'll see as we go along there. How do you view the outlook for this offense now and the way that you construct the lineup? Because that's where things, to me, get interesting again is, all right, you did this thing with Mason Wynn, which you hated. I liked at the time. I was somebody that was pounding the table for Mason Wynn to get those opportunities in the two-hole, and it's worked out thus far. Ivan Herrera, though, is pretty clearly a top 4 hitter on this team. I mean, you could make a pretty strong argument that he's the best hitter right now on the St. Louis Cardinals. How do you view the outlook for their lineup and how you think it can be constructed when Herrera is back in it?
So I think you keep the top five the same, except you just, instead of having Wynn in the 2 spot, you put Herrera there. Because I think you're right. I think right now he probably serves as your best hitter. Where it gets interesting is if you do decide to DH him a lot, now you pluck Burley, who they wanted to give runway to. So all of a sudden you've pulled Alec Burleson out of the lineup, unless they continue to do kind of work days for Jordan Walker. Then you can possibly put him in the outfield if you wanted to. But I think you hit Herrera in the 2 spot, and I hate to say this because you're right. I was totally wrong on Wynn being in the 2 spot. We don't need to talk about that. But I think you bump Mason Wynn back down to either the 8 or 9 spot, and you go back to what was working for them early on in the season and using that as kind of the double leadoff spot, using that as kind of the feeder for the top of the order. And it's nothing that Mason Wynn has done because he's been great. But same could be said for Victor Scott. He's been great this year too, and he's hitting in the 9 spot. But I think that's the best way to do it because Herrera can provide a little bit more power to that 2 spot than what Mason Wynn, when you think of him in a batter's profile, he's been adding a little pop since he's been moved up there. But I think you have to go with Ivan Herrera. You stick with Arenado as your cleanup hitter. Contreras is 5, and then you keep Donnie and Nootbaar on their spots in the order.
What if they don't? What if they say, you know what, Mason Wynn provides energy at the top of the lineup. We like the look of it. We think that that's the way that this should go. They're not going to move Arenado out of the cleanup spot, right? Because that's probably the correct answer to this.
I agree.
The move is probably go Herrera 2, Donnie 3, Contreras 4.
Win 5.
Potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with
Or Burleson 5, win 6, Scott 7. I mean, this is where it gets really tough. Now it becomes about personalities and how you manage some of the players, which is every bit as important at times as how you manage the individual game on the field.
Yeah, and this is where it will be tough for Oli Marmol, and this is where I've given him credit and flowers in the past. He was able to talk with a guy like an Albert Pujols, a Hall of Famer, and hey, here's why we're pinch hitting with when a right-handed flamethrower came on early on in 2022, we're going to Corey Dickerson here. You know, you think back to even last year, I said it at the time, and he ended up doing it for stretches, and then he kind of got back into Goldie and Arenado in the top 4. But there were stretches where he was hitting Goldie 5, Arenado 5. I'd have to look. I don't know if they ended up moving Arenado below 5, but that was
I don't think so.
A conversation that was had, not so much hitting him below the 5 spot, but would he be willing to bump him down in the order? And to Ollie's credit, he did it for a while. And these are the type of conversations he's going to have as a manager and have to just say, and I wonder if Arenado would be more accepting to it now. He's just not the same guy anymore. He's not a cleanup hitter. When you look at his batted ball profile, though he looks a little better this year, he's not a cleanup hitter anymore.
Yeah, he's more of a contact guy. He looks like a guy that profiles as a 5 or a 6-hole hitter. So we'll see what they decide to do there. 6 games between now and the next time that we will be back on the Redbird Report. Those games will be played 3 in Washington, 3 in Philadelphia. T-Bone, for you, the number one thing that you're curious about in these 6 games that we will see by the time that we record our next episode is what?
Will the middle relief, the underbelly of the bullpen as we call him, will Graceffo, Matz, and I guess I'll throw JoJo into this as well. Do those 3 guys help keep that part of the bullpen stabilized for the days that it is, hey, we're down by 2, so we don't want to use a high leverage arm. Can you guys keep the game close and hope our offense can get us back in it? Or, boy, somebody's down today. Helsley, Maton, they're not available to go. Leahy's the closer. Can you guys bridge that gap to him? That is the part of the St. Louis Cardinals I'm going to be highly focused on, because I think if that part can stabilize, like we talked about early on in this podcast, I think they can have a winning road trip.
And for me, it's what does Ivan Herrera's return to the lineup mean for this offense? Because right now they have so many good complementary pieces. There are a lot of guys in this lineup right now that are producing at a league average or better rate. What they're missing is that dude in the middle of the order. And we've been talking about this for a number of years outside of basically like a 2-year stretch where Arenado and Goldie were those guys, right? Or Pujols for like a 3-month stretch became the best hitter in Major League Baseball. When you have that guy, everything else in the lineup becomes so much easier. And he cleans everything up. You get guys that are suddenly scoring more runs. Like Ivan Herrera was that guy for the first couple of weeks of the season, and then he left, and the lineup's been mostly mediocre ever since. What does this mean? What does the return of Ivan Herrera, especially going up against some really good pitchers in that Phillies series, what does that mean for the lineup? Can they get back to what they were when he was here the first time around?
And real quick, to our just previous conversation about Arenado, you know how many times he hit in the 6th spot last year? Because he did do it. Ollie did do it. I thought I remembered him putting him in that spot. 14 games started in the 6th spot. So he had the conversation with him at one point last year, moved him down there, and then flipped him back into either 4th or 5th. But he did have that conversation, and it could play out to where this might be the Herrera return, might be the thing that knocks him down in the order.
Cardinals are back to 500. We've seen some winning baseball. 5 games in a row for the Cardinals at the time of this recording. They've got 6 games coming up on a road trip, which has been a problem for the Cardinals so far this season. 3 in Washington, 3 in Philadelphia. We'll break it all down for you guys next week when we return on the Redbird Report. For Tanner Hendrickson and Zane, who does all of the work behind the scenes on the video side of things, I'm Brandon Kiley. Thanks so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. We'll talk to you next week on the Redbird Report.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.